I was hired to watch a house at night. Easy money, they said. Just follow the rules and don't open the basement door. But by the 7th night, the mirror started whispering my name, and I realized the house wasn't empty. It was alive. It had been waiting for me. It began with an email that shouldn't have existed. The sender's address was a jumble of random numbers, followed by hollowhouse.co. No company by that name existed. The subject line simply read, "Night watch position. Immediate start." Normally, I'd have deleted something that sketchy without a second thought, but I was 3 months behind on rent, and my car payment was circling the drain. The message promised $1,200 a night to watch over a property. No experience required. The email gave only an address, 14 Dunroth Hill, and one instruction: arrive before dusk. Bring no one. It sounded insane. But desperation has a way of silencing reason. By 6:30 that evening, I was driving through a narrow forest road, the canopy so thick my headlights barely pierced it. The pavement ended miles back. My GPS had lost signal. Then I saw the sign, weathered and tilting, Dunroth Hill, private property. The house appeared without warning, rising from the fog like something dragged out of memory. It was enormous, 3 stories of gray stone veined with ivy, its windows reflecting the dying light like bleeding glass. I parked by the gate, half expecting someone to tell me it was all a mistake. A woman was waiting on the front steps, tall, sharply dressed in a long black coat, silver hair tied in a severe bun. "You must be Mr. Hale," she said. Her voice carried strangely, thin but resonant, like 2 people speaking in unison. "I'm Mrs. Dunroth." Her handshake was dry and cool. "You've arrived at the right time," she said. "The house requires a watcher." "A watcher for what?" I asked, forcing a laugh. Her eyes drifted toward the tree line where the fog thickened. "For what listens, for what stirs when the dark grows deep. You'll learn soon enough." She handed me a sheet of paper, the ink faintly smudged. It read, "The rules of night watch. Keep every light on from dusk until dawn. Do not open the basement door under any circumstance. Ignore all voices calling your name after midnight. Never look directly into the mirrors after 3 a.m. If the house goes silent, do not move." "Simple enough?" she asked. I looked up, half expecting her to smirk, but she didn't. "You're serious?" "Very." She turned, descending the steps. "Stay in the study. It's the safest room." The word safest clung to me long after she was gone. The heavy oak door shut behind her with a sound that echoed through the halls like a closing tomb. Inside, the air smelled faintly metallic, as if the walls had been bleeding rust. The house's interior was grand, but wrong paintings with blurred faces, hallways that seemed longer than they should be, mirrors that shimmered faintly when you passed. Every floorboard groaned beneath invisible weight. "I found the study!" A small, wood-paneled room with a desk, a flickering lamp, and a grandfather clock that ticked too loudly. I tried the Wi-Fi. No signal. My phone showed 0 bars. Perfect. I told myself this was easy money. Sit, stay awake, and leave at dawn. Simple. The kind of job an idiot could do, an idiot like me. By 11, the house had settled into uneasy quiet. I checked my watch, reread the rules, and laughed nervously at the absurdity of it all. Then the clock struck midnight. A long, slow chime rolled through the house, and underneath it, barely audible, a whisper. It came from the walls, thin as breath, curling around my name. "Hale!" I froze. "Hale! Come downstairs!" The voice was soft, coaxing female. It sounded close, too close. I gripped the paper in my hand, eyes darting to the door. The ink shimmered faintly under the lamplight as though it were still wet. Mrs. Dunroth hadn't been joking. Not at all. The whisper faded, leaving the house too quiet, as if sound itself had stepped outside. I told myself it was just the wind, though I hadn't seen a single tree move since arriving. The air inside Dunroth House felt thick, resisting every breath, like the place didn't want me here. I sat rigid in the study, staring at the lamp's trembling glow. The grandfather clock ticked on, slow and deliberate, a heartbeat for something that shouldn't be alive. I turned the volume up on my phone, playing an old podcast to drown out the silence, but the speaker hissed with static, then cut to dead air. No signal, no noise, nothing. After a few minutes, I forced myself to move. The house was supposed to be empty, but curiosity chewed through fear. I stepped into the hall, flashlight trembling in my hand. The floorboards moaned under my weight. The portraits I'd seen earlier looked different now. The colors seemed drained, leaving pale gray faces staring back at me with wide, uncertain eyes. One man's mouth, painted in a faint curve before, had changed into something closer to a sneer. I blinked. It was the same portrait. Trying to laugh it off, I kept walking. The mansion unfolded like a maze-long corridors branching into parlors, galleries, and drawing rooms. Dust coated everything, yet the smell wasn't of decay. It was something sharper, metallic, almost sweet, like copper left in the sun. I passed a tall mirror framed in gold. My reflection followed me half a second too late. That tiny delay sent a cold wave down my spine. I tore my eyes away, remembering Rule 4, never look directly into the mirrors after 3 a.m. I glanced at my watch. 12:47. Fine. Safe for now. From the hallway came a faint shuffle like someone dragging a foot across carpet. I swung my light. Nothing. Then, at the edge of the beam, I saw a shadow move, not mine, sliding along the wall like oil. My heart hammered. I backed into the nearest room, slammed the door, and turned the lock. Inside was what must have once been the music room. A piano sat under a dusty sheet, the kind old enough to play itself if you believed in ghosts. Something brushed the keys. A single note chimed out, sharp and lonely. Then another. I ran back to the study. By the time I closed the door, sweat clung to my palms. The whisper returned, closer this time. "Hale, you shouldn't wander!" My flashlight flickered, then died. I stayed still, breathing through my teeth. The whisper sounded amused. "Who are you?" I said, though my voice barely made a sound. No answer, just silence. Then, faintly, the piano again. One note played softly, like a lullaby for someone buried alive. I stayed there until the first hint of gray light seeped through the curtains. The whisper vanished with dawn. The silence broke, and suddenly birds outside began to sing, as if someone had turned the world back on. I almost laughed in relief when the front door opened and Mrs. Dunroth stepped in, perfectly composed, as though she'd just returned from a pleasant morning walk. "Your first night went well, I hope?" she asked. "There was." I stopped. How could I explain it? "There was noise," I managed. Her smile was brittle. "The house is old. It settles at night." "You'll adjust." She handed me an envelope, thick, heavy. "Your payment. Be here before dusk tonight. The house dislikes lateness." As she walked away, her shoes clicked rhythmically against the floorboards, but when she turned the corner, the sound didn't stop. It kept going click, 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 circling the house long after she'd gone. That was when I realized something I hadn't noticed before. Every window on Dunroth Hill faced inward, like the house didn't want to look out. It wanted to look at me. By the third evening, the air around Dunroth House no longer felt empty. It felt crowded, like something unseen shared every breath I took. The first 2 nights had been tense but survivable. I told myself I was imagining the whispers, the shifting shadows, the sounds of feet on the upper floors. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. Still, $1,200 a night was a powerful sedative for fear. I arrived early, hoping daylight might make the place less sinister. It didn't. The sun never seemed to touch the house directly, no matter how bright the day. Its light bent away, leaving the mansion in a soft, perpetual dusk. Mrs. Dunroth met me at the door again. She looked tired, or rather thinner somehow, her face drawn tight as parchment. "You came back," she said. "Of course," I replied, forcing confidence I didn't feel. "Easy money, right?" Her eyes flickered gray and hollow. "Easy isn't the word I'd use." "Still, you're adapting faster than most." "Most?" She ignored the question, glancing toward the staircase. "Did you follow the rules?" "Yes." I hesitated. "Mostly." Her expression hardened. "Mostly doesn't count here, Mr. Hale. The house doesn't forgive mistakes." She reached into her coat pocket and handed me a small brass key attached to a leather tag. It read, "Study on Lee." "This door locks from the inside," she said. "Use it after dusk. Do not open it no matter what you hear, and keep every light on." "Has anyone," I began, then stopped. "Anyone what?" she asked. "Stayed here longer than a few nights?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Not recently." After she left, I locked the study door and turned on every lamp I could find. The yellow light cast long, quivering shadows on the walls, but the room felt marginally safer until the phone on the desk rang. I jumped. It was an antique rotary phone, heavy and black, the kind that shouldn't even be connected anymore. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I picked it up on instinct. "Hello?" For a moment, nothing. Then a sound, a faint, wet breathing. I dropped the phone. The receiver swung on its cord, tapping softly against the desk. The voice continued, distant but deliberate. "Why did you lock the door?" I kicked the receiver away. It went silent instantly. I forced myself to reread the rules, whispering them aloud like a mantra. "Keep the lights on. Don't open the basement door. Ignore the voices. Don't look in mirrors. Don't move if the house goes silent." 1:30, the air changed. Every sound, the ticking clock, the hum of the lamp, stopped. Silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was crushing, suffocating. Even my own heartbeat seemed to hesitate. I remembered the 5th rule and froze. My muscles screamed to move, but I didn't dare. Then came the footsteps. Soft at first, then heavier. Someone or something was pacing right outside the study door. A faint knock followed. "Mr. Hale?" It was Mrs. Dunroth's voice. Calm, familiar. "Open the door, please. I need to speak with you." My throat tightened. She'd left hours ago. The doorknob turned slowly. Metal scraped against metal, but the key held. "Please," she said again, her tone breaking into something desperate. "It's cold out here." I stared at the door. The shadows under it shifted, 2 feet, then 4, then something that didn't have a shape at all. The light flickered once, twice. Then sound returned in a rush. The lamps hummed, the clock ticked, my breath came back ragged. The footsteps were gone. I stayed awake until dawn, staring at that door, the brass key still trembling in the lock. When morning came, I unlocked it. The hallway beyond was empty, but on the wood, carved deep into the grain, was a message written in jagged letters. Next time, let me in. By the 4th night, I'd learned the rhythm of the house, or at least I thought I had. The whispers came after midnight. The silence came at 1. The footsteps came at 2. Every night in the same order, like clockwork. Predictable. Terrifying, but predictable. That night, rain started around dusk, hammering against the windows in sharp bursts. I arrived early again, flashlight and coffee thermos in hand, trying to convince myself I was getting used to this. Routine helps, I told myself. Fear hates routine. When I unlocked the door, a gust of stale air greeted me, carrying that metallic sin I could never name. The house was darker than usual, even with the lights on. The corners seemed thicker somehow, like the shadows had weight. I walked straight to the study, locked the door, and turned on every lamp. I set my phone on the desk, though I knew it wouldn't get a signal. I even spoke aloud to the house, to myself, I wasn't sure. Another night, same deal, no tricks. At midnight, right on time, the whisper began again. My name, stretched and broken, as though someone were dragging it through water. I gritted my teeth and focused on the rules. Ignore it! Ignore everything! Then something new happened. The whisper stopped and laughter followed. A child's laughter, light, playful, utterly wrong. It echoed from somewhere near the stairs. I checked the time, 12:51:15. My pulse quickened. The house wasn't supposed to change its pattern. The laughter came again, this time closer, followed by the patter of small feet running across the hall. I swallowed hard and pressed my back to the study wall, flashlight shaking in my hand. The door rattled once. Then again, I shouted, "Stop it! Silence!" Then, softly from the other side, "You're not supposed to talk." Every hair on my body stood on end. The voice was a whisper now, no longer a child, but something older, using a child's tone like a mask. I forced myself to stay still. Don't move, don't speak. The light dimmed slightly, flickering in slow pulses. The air grew colder, heavy enough that I could see my breath. I gripped the desk, grounding myself in something solid. Suddenly, a loud thud shook the door. I jumped. Another followed, something slamming hard, over and over, trying to break through. The brass key trembled in the lock, and then, without warning, everything stopped. The silence returned, crushing, absolute. I couldn't breathe. My heart felt too loud. I counted seconds in my head, praying sound would come back. Then, 3 soft knocks. 1, 2, 3. When sound finally returned, the clock ticked again, its chime announcing 2:30 a.m. I exhaled shakily, still frozen in place. I stayed like that until the first gray light crept through the curtains. When I finally gathered the courage to open the door, I expected nothing. But the hallway carpet was soaked, as if something dripping had walked its length. The wet footprints stopped just outside the study, small, bare, unmistakably human. I followed them cautiously toward the main hall. They ended at the base of the staircase, in front of the door that led to the basement. The basement door was locked with a heavy iron latch, but now, hanging from it, was a child's handprint, perfectly clear, pressed into the wood like the mark of something that wasn't flesh at all. I stumbled back, my stomach twisting. Behind me, the grandfather clock chimed again. Mrs. Dunroth was waiting at the door when I turned. I hadn't even heard her enter. "You opened it," she said flatly. "No," I stammered. "I didn't touch it." She tilted her head, eyes unreadable. "Then the house has taken an interest in you. What does that mean?" She smiled faintly. "It means it remembers." By the 5th night, I'd stopped pretending I wasn't afraid. I arrived an hour early, parked by the gate, and just sat there in my car, watching the house through the rain-streaked windshield. The mansion loomed in silence, its windows like black eyes fixed on me. It didn't feel like I was going inside a place anymore. It felt like I was being let in. The wet handprint from last night still haunted me. I kept seeing it in flashes, the small, perfect shape of fingers pressed into wood. I'd barely slept, but I couldn't quit. The money was too good. And somewhere beneath the fear, curiosity had taken root. What was this house? What was Mrs. Dunroth hiding? When I finally stepped inside, the air was thicker than usual. The lamps flickered in greeting, the way an animal might bare its teeth. I called out softly, "Mrs. Dunroth?" No answer. Her car wasn't outside, and there was no sign of her presence. Still, on the entry table, I found another note, short, written in her delicate hand. "If you hear knocking from the basement tonight, do not acknowledge it. It is not asking to be let out. It is asking to come in." The words sank into me like ice water. I shoved the note into my pocket, locked myself in the study, and sat down to wait. The hours stretched like old rubber. I couldn't focus on anything. My eyes kept drifting toward the door, toward the hall that led to the basement stairs. At exactly 12,003, the whisper started again. "Oh, hail!" My grip tightened on the desk. "Ignore it!" Then came the knocking. 3 soft taps, deliberate and slow. It came from below, from the basement door. I froze. The sound continued, steady and patient. Then silence. I almost believed it was over until I heard a faint scraping, like nails dragging down the inside of the door. I stood, heart pounding, and crept toward the hallway. The rule screamed in my head, "Do not open the basement door!" But something about the knocking drew me closer. It wasn't random, it was rhythmic, like someone trying to speak through sound. I reached the staircase. The basement door sat at the bottom, bathed in the soft glow of a single bulb. Water dripped somewhere behind it. My pulse roared in my ears. Another knock, then a whisper. Not from behind the door, but right beside my ear. "Let me show you." I spun around. No one there, just empty air and the faint smell of damp stone. The bulb flickered. For a split second, I saw something standing by the door, a silhouette, thin and bent, with long arms and a head that tilted too far to one side. The light blinked out. I ran. I didn't stop until I slammed the study door behind me and locked it. My breath came ragged, my shirt sticking to my back. Then, from across the room, I heard it again, knocking. This time from inside the study wall. 3 taps, a pause, then 3 more. The light dimmed again. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it at the sound. The wallpaper there was bubbling slightly, as if something beneath was pressing outward. A shape formed under the surface, a hand, small and trembling. The fingers curled once, twice before sinking back into the wall. When dawn came, I'd barely noticed. My hands were shaking too hard to unlock the door. That morning, Mrs. Dunroth was waiting outside, her face paler than usual. "You heard it," she said quietly. I nodded, unable to speak. She looked at me with something like pity. "The house knows you now. It doesn't forget." Then she added, almost to herself, "Not after what it did to them." "Them?" I asked, but she was already walking away. Her footsteps echoed too long, like someone else was walking just behind her. By the 6th night, the house no longer waited for darkness to show its hunger. It was already awake when I arrived, lights flickering, windows breathing faint mist, the air charged like before a thunderstorm. I could feel it watching. I told myself to quit. I even turned the car around halfway up the hill, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, the gate had already closed behind me. The iron bars locked tight, vines coiling around them like hands. I didn't even remember driving through. When I reached the front door, it swung open before I touched it. The study lamps glowed faintly down the hall, like eyes guiding me back to my cage. "No, Mrs. Dunroth, tonight! No note, only silence," until the clock struck 12. The first hour of every night was the same. Whispers, creaking floors, the house testing me. But after midnight, things changed. The pattern was gone. The familiar sequence replaced by something new, something worse. It began with footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate, then a door opening, then another. I stayed in the study, gripping the brass key in my fist, trying not to breathe too loudly. A woman's voice drifted down the stairs, soft, melodic. "You shouldn't be alone, Mr. Hale." My heart stopped. The voice was familiar. "Mrs. Dunroth." But she wasn't here. I swallowed hard. "You said never to open the door," I whispered, staring at the wood. "I'm not." The voice came again, closer now, right outside. "Oh, but I am inside." The knob twitched once, twice, then it turned slowly. I jumped back, slamming my shoulder into the wall. The lock held. Barely. The voice changed, sharper, layered, like several people speaking through the same throat. "It's rude to keep guests waiting." Footsteps moved away from the door, heavy and dragging. Then another sound joined them, lighter, quicker, almost playful. Multiple sets of feet pacing through the hall. Visitors. The lamps flickered as shadows passed under the study door, long, stretched, impossible shapes. Then came laughter. Children again, dozens of them. The sound filled the house like water filling a tank. It rose, echoed, twisted into something not human. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the laughter wasn't in the air. It was inside my skull. Suddenly, everything stopped. Total silence. I remembered the rule. If the house goes silent, do not move. So I didn't. Something brushed past my back. I froze. It felt like a fingertip tracing the outline of my spine through my shirt. My skin burned cold. A whisper came from inches behind me. "You broke the rule." I turned before I could stop myself. There was no one there, just a ripple in the air, like heat rising off asphalt. But the smell that followed was unmistakable, wet soil and rot, like something recently unearthed. I stumbled toward the desk, knocking over the lamp. The light shattered, and in that brief moment of darkness, I saw them. Figures, pale, translucent, crowding the study walls. Men, women, children, their faces half-formed, their eyes hollow. They stood motionless, staring not at me, but at the locked door. Then, as one, they turned their heads toward me. "Let us in," they said together. I screamed. The lights flared, then exploded. The room filled with blinding white, and when it cleared, nothing. The study was empty. Only the clock remained, ticking calmly, as if nothing had happened. I stayed awake until dawn, shaking. When I finally stepped outside, I nearly collapsed on the porch. Mrs. Dunroth's car was waiting. She looked worse than ever, her eyes sunken, her hands trembling. "You saw them," she said quietly. I nodded. Her lips tightened. "They come to everyone eventually. You must never invite them in, no matter what form they take." "What are they?" I asked. She looked toward the windows, her voice barely a whisper. "Not who? When?" And before I could ask what she meant, the front door behind me creaked open on its own. By the seventh night, the air inside Dunroth House felt different, heavier, almost electric. Each breath tasted faintly of dust and something older, something metallic. I'd grown used to the creaking floors, the whispers, the way the walls seemed to breathe. But this was new. The house wasn't merely haunted tonight, it was curious. When I entered, the lamps along the hallway flickered to life one by one, as though guiding me somewhere. Normally, I'd go straight to the study and lock the door, but the strange invitation in that flickering trail was impossible to ignore. My heart beat a warning, but my feet kept moving. At the end of the corridor, I found a door I'd never seen before. It was narrow, carved with spiraling patterns that shimmered faintly when my flashlight swept over them. The knob turned easily. The hinges gave a sigh, like something inside had been waiting to breathe again. The room beyond was filled with mirrors. Dozens of them. Tall, small, warped, cracked, covering every inch of the walls. Some were ancient, their silver backing faded to dull gray. Others looked newer, but wrong, as if someone had tried to copy a reflection and failed halfway through. My reflection multiplied infinitely, stretching into endless versions of me, each slightly out of sync. One blinked a moment late, another didn't blink at all. I remembered Rule 4, never look directly into the mirrors after 3 a.m. I checked my watch. 1:42, safe, for now. The air inside the room was colder. I could see my breath fogging the glass nearest to me, though none of the other reflections exhaled. That was when I noticed it. One reflection, third mirror on the left, didn't move when I did. I froze. I lifted my right hand, it lifted its left. A moment's delay. A smirk spread across its mouth. Mine did not. My flashlight flickered, and for half a second the figure in the mirror wasn't me. It was taller, gaunter, its eyes solid black, and its grin stretched too far. When the light steadied, my face returned, but pale, drawn, afraid. The mirror closest to me vibrated softly, a faint hum like trapped bees. The sound deepened until it felt more like a heartbeat, slow, rhythmic, and not my own. Something behind the glass moved closer. Not a reflection, but a shadow within the silver. It pressed against the surface, and for a moment I thought the glass might crack. Then, from somewhere deeper in the room, a whisper slithered through the mirrors. "You're in the wrong place." I turned toward the sound, but the voice echoed from every direction, repeating the phrase until the words overlapped. "Wrong place, wrong place, wrong place." I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over an old vanity. My flashlight beam caught one mirror half covered with a sheet. Instinct said not to look, but I couldn't help myself. I pulled the fabric away. The reflection showed the study behind me, empty, lights on, safe. But when I turned, the hallway outside the mirror room was gone. Only darkness remained. In it, someone walked into the study. "Mrs. Dunroth," or something wearing her face. She sat at the desk, folded her hands, and looked straight into the mirror, straight at me. Her voice came through like a ripple of sound underwater. "You've stayed too long." The mirrors began to tremble, the air vibrating with a deep, low hum. I ran, slamming the door behind me. The hallway returned, though shorter somehow, the walls closer together. Back in the study, I locked the door and collapsed into the chair. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I stared at my reflection in the desk's polished surface, trying to steady my breath. Then my reflection blinked once, twice out of rhythm with me. I threw the lamp off the desk. The light shattered, plunging the room into black. In that instant before the bulb went out, my reflection smiled. In its lips formed silent words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. "I'm already out." Morning came late, as if the sun itself hesitated to rise over Dunroth Hill. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile in the mirror, the version of me that wasn't me. I could still feel its gaze somewhere in the house, watching from behind glass or beneath the floorboards. At 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mr. Dunroth. He never called, he only texted. "House in good condition? Any disturbances?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Everything's fine. It was a lie, and I think he knew. The unease that began as curiosity had turned into something heavier, something that felt like obligation. I needed to know what this place really was, and what kind of man would pay someone to stay here night after night with rules designed to keep secrets buried. After breakfast, I searched the house in daylight. It didn't help much. Even under the pale sun, the walls still seemed to drink in light. Dust floated in the air like ash. The paintings on the walls had shifted again. In one, Mrs. Dunroth stood beside a man whose face was smeared into nothing, but his hand rested on her shoulder, too long, too bony. In the hallway near the back, I found a door I'd never noticed before. It led to a small study, one that looked untouched for years. Papers were stacked in uneven piles, a typewriter sat beneath a cracked window, and on the wall hung a photograph of the Dunroths standing in front of the same house, but smaller, older. Something about it made me uneasy. The house behind them had 6 windows across the front. The one I was in only had 5. I rummaged through the desk drawers, fingers trembling. Most were empty except one. Inside was a folder labeled Caretaker Records. My name wasn't the first. There were at least 7 before me. Each had a start date, but no end date, just a dash. The most recent record before mine was dated 3 months ago. The caretaker's name, Elena Maris. I froze. I knew that name. It was the same name carved into the tree near the property gate, half hidden under moss. There was also a letter folded neatly beneath the folder. The handwriting was elegant but shaky. To whoever reads this next, the Dunroth house doesn't just need watching, it needs feeding. Every rule protects you, not from what's outside, but from what wants to get out. The mirrors are gateways. They show what the house remembers. Never trust what you see. If you hear them calling your name, it's already too late. The paper smelled faintly of smoke and something else, something metallic, like blood. I shoved it back in the drawer and stepped away, heart hammering. But before I could leave, I noticed movement in the photograph on the wall. Mrs. Dunroth's face was turned toward me now. Her smile had widened. That night I confronted Mr. Dunroth through the only number he'd given me. When he finally answered, his voice was low, almost weary. "You've seen the mirrors, haven't you?" I swallowed. "What is this place?" Silence. Then, "A vessel. My wife built it. She couldn't let go of what she'd lost, so she made the house remember. But memory decays. It needs anchors. That's why we hire watchers. People who stay. People who see." My stomach turned. "What happens to them?" "You already know," he whispered. "Look in any mirror." The call ended. The line went dead. I stood there in the dark hallway, every reflection trembling faintly along the walls. And in each mirror behind my reflection, a woman stood watching, her eyes hollow, her lips whispering the same thing over and over. Elena Maris. By the 9th night, the rules no longer mattered. The house had started making its own. The air carried a low hum, a vibration that trembled through the floorboards into my bones. Every clock in the house ticked out of sync, creating a rhythm like a heartbeat. The lamps flickered without reason. Even the walls seemed to breathe, inhaling shadows, exhaling cold. I'd stopped trying to sleep. My thoughts no longer felt like my own. Every time I blinked, I saw flashes of the other caretakers, their faces pale, lips moving soundlessly, eyes filled with the same exhausted dread. I could feel them here. Watching, waiting. At 2037 a.m., I heard it, the basement door creaking open on its own, the one door I'd sworn never to touch. I grabbed my flashlight, though its beam looked weak, as if the darkness was swallowing the light before it could reach the walls. The sound grew louder, a scraping like fingernails on wood. Then came whispering, faint but unmistakable. "My name!" Over and over. I called out, voice trembling. "Who's down there?" No answer. Just another whisper, closer this time. "You are!" I backed away from the stairwell, but the shadows stretched toward me, long and reaching. They clung to my ankles like smoke. I ran to the study, slamming the door behind me. The mirrors lining the walls shivered. Their surfaces rippled like disturbed water. In each reflection, the house looked wrong, tilted, rotting, dripping with dark stains that pulsed slowly, like veins. I blinked, and for a moment I wasn't in the study anymore. I stood outside, under a bruised sky, the mansion looming above me, only it wasn't whole. The roof twisted upward like a black crown, and every window glowed red. I turned, and standing beside me was Elena Maris. Her hair hung in tangled strands, her face half missing, as though burned away. Her eyes met mine, calm, resigned. "You shouldn't have stayed this long," she said softly. Her voice was like wind through dry leaves. "It knows you now. I wanted to speak, to ask what it was, but the world around us shuddered." The house behind her groaned, its foundation splitting open. A river of darkness spilled from the cracks, crawling across the ground toward us. Elena reached for my hand, cold as marble. "It's feeding," the word echoed, pulling me back. Suddenly I was in the study again, gasping, drenched in sweat. The mirrors were still rippling. My reflection was gone. The room began to twist. The wallpaper peeled itself off, letters forming from the exposed plaster beneath. "Stay you until dawn." I stumbled out into the hallway that no longer led where it should. Each turn ended in the same place, the mirror room, every door open to it, as though the house had folded in on itself. And in the center of that room, a figure stood. It was me, or something wearing me. The doppelganger skin looked pale and stretched, its mouth fixed in that same too-wide grin I'd seen before. "You shouldn't fight it," it said. "You're part of it now." My double stepped forward. With every movement it made, my body ached, like it was dragging my soul out through the mirror. The mirrors vibrated, cracking from within. The house moaned like it was alive. And then The walls bled. Thick, black liquid poured from every seam, dripping down the frames, pooling at my feet. It smelled of iron and decay. The figure reached out a hand. "Let it remember," I screamed, swinging the flashlight. The beam struck its face and the glass shattered. The sound was deafening. Everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was lying at the foot of the basement stairs. My flashlight was gone. And from the darkness below, something whispered gently, almost kindly, "Your turn to feed it." Not wide, just enough to show the first few steps vanishing into black. The air that drifted out was cold and wet, heavy with the scent of mold and something coppery, something that reminded me of blood. I stood there for a long time, listening. The whispers had stopped. The house was silent now, waiting. I knew I shouldn't go down. Every instinct screamed to run, to get in my car, to drive until the mansion was just a rumor behind me. But something stronger kept me there, a pull deep and invisible like gravity. The house wanted me to come closer, and I needed answers. I took the first step. The wood groaned, a long, low sigh that seemed almost human. The flashlight trembled in my hand, its beam shrinking as if the darkness below was swallowing the light whole. Halfway down, I felt the air change. It was warmer now, damp and faintly humming like there was machinery deep below the earth. I pressed on, counting each stair aloud just to hear my own voice. When I reached the bottom, the smell hit me full force. Decay. Rot. Old earth. The beam of my light landed on the floor stones, slick with black liquid. The walls were covered in something that wasn't paint lines and circles carved deep into the rock, glowing faintly red. Symbols, ancient and wrong. And in the center of the room stood a mirror, not like the ones upstairs. This one was enormous, its frame made of bone and rusted iron, its surface a living thing that pulsed slowly, breathing in time with the low hum that filled the chamber. Inside the mirror wasn't my reflection. It was the house. But not as it was now. It was older, decaying, as if time inside it ran differently. And behind the warped image of the house stood figures. 7 of them, the caretakers. Elena was there, her eyes hollow, her mouth moving soundlessly. Behind her, others stared blankly out, men and women trapped mid-scream, their faces warped by fear. My stomach turned as I stepped closer, their hands pressed against the glass from the other side. The surface rippled like water reaching toward me. Something whispered my name, not from the mirror, from behind me. I turned, light shaking wildly across the walls. Shadows crawled along the carvings, slithering toward the center. One of them rose, taller than a man, its body shaped like smoke and bone. It spoke without sound, its words crawling into my head. "You opened it. You broke the rule. You belong." I stumbled back. My foot slipped in the slick black film covering the floor. My hand struck the mirror. The surface was warm, alive. The reflection rippled again, and for one terrible second I felt fingers grasp mine from the other side. I tried to pull away, but the grip tightened, yanking me forward. My flashlight clattered to the ground, its beam spinning wildly before landing on something half buried in the wall. A skull. Dozens of them. The foundation of the house was made of them. I screamed and tore my hand free. The mirror shrieked. An inhuman wail that shook the entire chamber. Cracks spread across its surface, spiderwebbing outward. From each fracture leaked light red and pulsing like blood through veins. Then, for a moment, everything stopped. The hum faded, the house held its breath, and the mirror exploded. A rush of cold air threw me backward against the wall. Shards of glass rained down, cutting into my arms and face. When I looked up, the figures were gone. Only one reflection remained, mine. But it didn't move. It smiled. And then, slowly, it stepped forward, out of the broken frame, leaving the mirror behind. I stared at it, frozen, my own face walking toward me. It whispered, almost kindly, "Now you're the one behind the glass." The world inverted. Everything went black. When I came to, the world felt wrong. I was lying on the study floor, but the air no longer carried the chill of night. It was heavy, humid, almost thick enough to taste. The silence was gone, replaced by a deep, rhythmic sound that pulsed through the floor like a heartbeat. The house was breathing again. Every wall seemed to expand and contract, the wallpaper rippling as if stretched over flesh instead of wood. The lamps flickered, each one pulsing in time with that slow, monstrous rhythm. My head throbbed with every beat. I staggered to my feet. My reflection, the thing that had stepped from the mirror, was gone. But I knew it hadn't left. I could feel it nearby, inside the house, moving when I did, thinking when I thought. A faint echo of my own heartbeat followed me wherever I turned. The hallway ahead was longer than before. The floorboards sagged under my feet, wet and warm. The paintings on the walls were alive, faces shifting in and out of view, eyes rolling to follow me as I passed. One canvas bled slowly from its corners, the red dripping down like tears. Somewhere above me, a door slammed, then another. The whole house began to tremble, every window rattling violently. A whisper spread through the air, layered and overlapping. 100 voices saying the same word in unison. "Remember!" I clutched my head and shouted, "What do you want from me?" The whisper stopped. Then, from the end of the hall, a voice, mine but distorted, answered softly, "I want to come home." I turned and saw it, my double standing at the far end, pale and hollow-eyed, smiling with a kind of sadness that made my stomach twist. It started walking toward me. With every step it took, the house warped, the ceiling lowering, the lights dimming, the floor swelling upward like muscle tightening beneath skin. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. My reflection stopped a few feet away, studying me. Its head tilted slightly. "You saw it, didn't you?" I whispered. "The heart of this place, the truth beneath." I didn't answer. My throat felt locked. The doppelganger smiled wider. "This house remembers every soul that's ever entered. It keeps them. It feeds on the act of watching. Every time someone looks too closely, they become part of it." The walls pulsed harder now, the sound deafening. I pressed my hands against my ears, but the noise came from inside me. My double reached out a hand. "You're already inside, you know." "You never left the basement!" I screamed and swung my flashlight, but it passed through the figure like mist. The light hit the far wall, and the wallpaper peeled back, revealing what was underneath. Flesh, veins, faces pressed against it from the inside, their mouths opening soundlessly. The floor split beneath me. From the cracks seeped that black liquid again, bubbling like tar. The air grew hotter. The whispering returned, stronger, louder, pleading. Hands burst from the walls, clawing toward me. I ran. Every hallway folded in on itself, twisting into impossible angles. Stairs led nowhere. Doors opened into the same room. The house was a living maze, reshaping itself around me. Finally, I stumbled into the main hall. The chandelier above me swung wildly, shedding sparks. At the far end, the front door stood open. I sprinted toward it, only to see my reflection standing in the doorway, blocking the exit. It lifted a finger to its lips. "Shh," it said gently. "You'll wake it." Behind me, the floor swelled. From beneath the boards came a single, massive thud like something enormous shifting in its sleep. Then the walls cracked open. The house exhaled. A rush of darkness poured through the hall, swallowing everything, and the last thing I heard before it reached me was my own voice, whispering from somewhere deep inside the walls. "You were hired to watch it, but now it's watching you." When I opened my eyes, everything was still. No sound, no movement, just silence so deep it felt alive. I was sitting upright in the study, the lamp burning steadily beside me, as if nothing had happened. The walls were clean again, no blood, no faces, no breathing plaster. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed it all. But my hands told another story. Dried blood streaked across my fingers, tiny cuts from shattered glass, still fresh and stinging. The air carried a faint metallic tang, the scent of something old and burnt. I stood up, legs trembling. My reflection stared at me from the window pane. It didn't move this time, not until I blinked. Then it smiled. Outside, dawn was breaking. Pale light crept across the fog-drenched yard, brushing over the skeletal trees. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was dread. The sunrise didn't look real, it looked painted on. The colors too soft, too perfect, as if the world outside was a photograph taped to the glass. I needed to leave, now. I grabbed my jacket, phone, and keys and hurried down the hall. Every step echoed too loudly. The house was quiet, but not empty. Something followed behind me, soft footsteps perfectly in sync with mine, always half a beat too late. At the front door, I froze. It was closed, locked. I didn't remember locking it. My shaking fingers fumbled with the latch, but it wouldn't budge. The metal felt warm, alive. A whisper brushed my ear. "You were supposed to stay until dawn." I spun around. The hallway stretched impossibly far, vanishing into darkness that shouldn't exist in daylight. The air shimmered faintly, as if the house itself were inhaling. On the walls, the paintings had changed again. No landscapes now, only portraits, faces I didn't recognize, men and women staring out with blank, glassy eyes. And at the end of the line, one new portrait. I stumbled backward, heart slamming against my ribs. The painted version of me wasn't standing in the hall. It was sitting in this very room, hand on the desk, eyes open, smiling faintly. Beneath it, a brass nameplate read, "Caretaker number 8. In service." I backed away until I hit the study door. The knob turned under my hand before I could stop it. The door swung open on its own. Inside, everything was as it had been my first night. The fireplace cold, the typewriter on the desk, the single rule sheet resting beside it. But there was one new line, freshly typed in neat black ink. "Do not attempt to leave before dawn. The house remembers those who break its rules." My throat closed. I turned to run, but the front door was gone. In its place stood another mirror. Through it, I could see myself standing in the hallway, pale and frightened. But behind my reflection, something loomed. A tall, faceless figure with arms too long, hands stretching toward my shoulders. I didn't have time to react. The reflection's eyes widened in terror just as cold fingers closed around my neck from behind. I struggled, gasping, but the grip was like iron. A voice, soft, familiar, whispered in my ear, "You're home now." The mirror rippled, and I was pulled forward. The world folded inward, colors twisting, sounds collapsing into silence. When it cleared, I was sitting at the desk again. The lamp glowed faintly. The house was still. Outside, the light of morning streamed through the window. Footsteps echoed down the hall. The front door opened. A young man stepped inside, holding a small suitcase. He looked around nervously, then called out, "Hello, I'm here for the caretaker position." I smiled, watching him through the glass of the mirror. "Welcome," I whispered. The door closed, and the house began to breathe again.